So one of the hello and welcome to another episode of The Gab. I'm your host, Gabby Lundy. And today the demographic we're going to be talking about is older adults. And what I mean by older is ages 65 plus and how they're represented in the media. And so today what we're going to do is a quick overview of just the general stereotypes we see for older adults in media. It'll go a little bit into ageism in Hollywood and go into two specific examples that counter these stereotypes. And so sometimes we don't think about age as a demographic as much, or maybe we just don't think about it as stereotype representations in media, but it does. Older adults are seen a lot in um, dichotomies, if you will. And there's a couple different dichotomies that older adults fall into in terms of stereotypes for TV and movies. So one of the things that's usually used for comedic effect is an older adult sexuality. And they're either seen as sexless, no sexual desires or anything like that because they're more of a grandma. On the flip side, they're also seen as hypersexual. And this can be used for like some sort of comedic effect or to be perceived as like creepy, like hitting on younger women type of thing. So that's like a weird extreme ends type of situation. And another thing we see is they're either healthy and active and just they don't really have any medical conditions to think of or speak of or worry about because they're just completely fine. Or they're like frail and sick and dying and it's part of the plot and someone has to take care of them and the focus is mostly on the person taking care of them. There's no real middle ground for those types of things either in accurately portraying how people age and the certain more common difficulties with aging instead of it being all or nothing. Another thing we normally see with older adults is that they're portrayed in a family unit. There's not a lot of older adults that are portrayed by themselves. It's usually, TV shows especially, it's this family life, maybe centered around the parents or the kids, depending if you're watching a kids channel or a more grown-up channel, sitcom or TV show. And the older adult is just there to play like a grandparent or parent type figure and to just be there in to explain those family relations and to be a part of the family dynamic. And generally for older adults, we see an underrepresentation in general, but for women especially, because in terms of demographics, we see that men make up 62 to 70% of the 65 and older roles in TV and in movies, but women actually make up 70% of that population. So there's a kind of a big difference there in terms of who exists in the real world and who we see in the real world and who we're seeing on TV in terms of older adults. Ageism is kind of a popular topic in the age of feminism because ageism kind of affects women more than men in Hollywood. Um, Older men have the opportunity for more roles, as we saw with that earlier statistic. Um, so women kind of get aged out of the acting business. And that kind of has a lot to do with looks. Women, when they age, are judged more harshly on their looks, and they're not perceived as hot enough anymore. So their roles are filled by younger counterparts. And so that's why these next two examples are really powerful. Both of these examples are a good counterbalance to the ageism in Hollywood that's also sexist, and also to counter the weight of that unequal representation in terms of gender. And so The Golden Girls is a really good example of a show that had dynamic older adults, but then it was also focused on four women, so that like countered that normal representation inequality. And it also showed really dynamic characters and fully fleshed out characters and didn't focus them in the context of their families or things like that, just in the context of themselves and each other. And this show was really popular. It was a really successful show that had this dynamic older woman selling point. And it's interesting because this model was never repeated. Despite the success of the show, this didn't become a type of show. It didn't become a genre to have the story focused around older adults. And we didn't see this model repeated successfully until, I would say, Grace and Frankie. This is a new Netflix show that's becoming really popular. It's on my list to watch, and from what I've read and what I've heard is that this show has two dynamic, spunky women, and it tackles topics that have to do with relationships and family and things like that, but also ageism and the process of getting older and how that affects us mentally and physically. And I think that's really important to have too. One, because a lot of the people I know who watch this show don't fit that demographic. They're not older um, adult women. um, they vary from young college men to middle-aged women to college women and high schoolers. People just like this show and have a good time watching it. And it's very interesting that these two shows are the only ones that I can really name off the top of my head and off the top of um, researching this, because if these shows do so well, why isn't the model copied? Why aren't we implementing that for other um, older adults in different TV shows? And I guess that's just something we'll have to work towards in the future. And because we don't see these depictions as lacking or damaging, um, no one's really saying anything about it. No one's really um, making protest videos about it, speaking out about it, or creating their own content about it. Um, so it's really interesting to see where this will go, especially as Grace and Frankie hits its third season on Netflix, as Netflix, as always, continues to make original content that people like and that's different. And that's all I have for you today on this episode of The Gab. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe so we can continue having this conversation. Make sure to follow my Twitter so you can see really awesome people that I retweet who have way more to say about these topics and way more in depth than I do. Make sure to follow the blog in the description below as well. I did a piece on Beauty and the Beast and a couple other blog posts. So my question for you today is, how do you feel about the depictions of older adults in media? Have you watched The Golden Girls? Have you watched Grace and Frankie? How do you feel about the representations in general? Does it remind you of yourself or your parents or your grandparents, or does it just seem too fake and too stereotyped for you to really relate to it? Let me know in the comments below. And always remember, you, as the audience, have power.